grab your tea, grab a seat, and tune in to Miss Liz. Tea time, making a difference, one cup at a time. Tea time, yeah. Tea time, time.
Well, welcome to Tea Time. That's right. It is Friday, you guys. I did not get my day mixed up. We did some rescheduling and all of that stuff because Miss Liz had something that came up yesterday. So we have the incredible James L. Hill in the house from the Rockhill Publishing. So we're gonna get used to leave your questions, comments, and all that stuff in the comment section. If you'd like to leave a private message and not be verified who you are and like to stay anonymous, you can also message Miss Liz on my Facebook page directly, and I will get those questions out to James. So tonight we're going to be talking about publishing. We're going to be talking about books, and we're going to talk about different genres. We're going to talk about a bunch of different stuff. But tonight's tea is tales, experiences, and adventures. That's right. That's the tea we'll be serving tonight. So before we get started, we're going to get the disclaimer out there. We're going to get the bio of James out there, and then we're going to get James in here. And we're going to spill some tea, and we're going to have some fun. So again, thank you guys all for tuning in to Miss Liz. But before we get started, we're going to get you over to Miss Liz's YouTube channel. We're going to get you to ring that little doorbell so you're notified when these tea times go live. And if you'd like to watch the replays, there's over 400 interviews that you can check out from all seasons 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 as well. So again, thank you for that. So disclaimer for Miss Liz's Tea Time live show. Miss Liz myself is going live using StreamYard. Before leaving a comment, please grant StreamYard permission to see your name at StreamYard.com. Please be advised that the content brought forward for any Tea Time show hosted by myself, Miss Liz, is always brought forward in good faith. However, may bring forth dialogues and opinions that are not representative of my platform. The facts and information are perceived to be accurate at the giving time of airing. All Tea Time guests and audience participants are responsible for using their good judgment and taking any action that relates to the discussion. The content brought forward may include discussions for some where they may be emotionally at risk. It's significant to know that this show is engaging in discussion forums only to offer and inspire awareness and connection and is not providing therapeutical advice. If you have any questions about any questions about the disclaimer or the panelist discussion, you may freely contact me, Miss Liz, through my email at bookingmissliz@gmail.com. Moving forward, should you choose to voluntarily participate in today's show in any aspect, I myself, Miss Liz, welcomes you. And should you decide that the show is not made for you at this time, I respect those wishes and will see you at a later show at a later date and time. Again, all original tea times are done on Thursday, 3 p.m. and 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. If you see a Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and now a Friday, you know that Miss Liz is always here to serve you a good cup of tea. So now a little bit about my guest. Well, who's my guest? First off, James L. Hill is a native from New York, a New Yorker from the Bronx. J.L. Hill grew up in Fort Apache during the 1960s, where gangs were a necessity. His childhood, influenced by blues, soul, and rock and roll, shaped him into a modern-day flower child. The upheaval of the Vietnam War, civil rights movements, and sexual revelations, fostering resilience and an adventurous spirit. With a unique moral compass shaped by 12 years of Catholic education and college years, James believes nothing is impossible. He began writing short stories and poetry in his youth before transitioning to novels in his 20s. His career in the financial industry and a degree in computer programming led him to a successful role as a software engineer for nearly 40 years. After returning to writing, James became a prolific, I'll get him to say the word, storytelling, exploring crimes, fantasy, and science fiction. He founded Rockhill Publishing, LLC, to publish his work and assist aspiring authors. His notable work includes the Killer series, which we'll be talking about, The Killer with a Heart, Inducing Young Gangsters, and Killer with Three Heads, featuring them as international criminals. His fantasy series include The Emerald Lady, set in the golden age of pirates, and the science fiction novel Pegasus, A Journey to the New Eden, which examines the emotional impact of technology and nuclear wars. J.L. Hill continues to create compelling narratives that resonate across all genres. So let me get James in here and let's spill some tea together. Welcome, James.
Hey, thank you. That was a pretty good intro, and it's prolific.
Prolific. Yeah, my
Prolific.
tongue sometimes it does this tongue twister thing, and I'm just like, I can't say it, so I'll get
Well,
the guests to say it.
there's a lot of words I can't pronounce. Don't worry about it.
So, James, welcome to Tea Time.
Thank you. I'm glad to
Oh,
be here.
don't worry. If you see wormholes, just keep talking. It's just technology stuff that does, but we can still
Oh,
hear the
I
audio.
know. Okay, I know. I work on computers all day long, so they're the bane of my existence, and pay well. So what can I tell you?
So, James, let's go back. I'm going to take you way back for my audience to get to know you a little bit better. So, who was James as a little boy, and who is James now?
As a little boy, I was very much into Marvel comics and very much
Oh,
into the Marvel universe. So we used to read the comics when we were not running and fighting. Like I said, well, I grew up in Fort Apache, the South Bronx. I know you're from Canada, but people who know the United States know New York. We have different neighborhoods, and if your neighborhood got a name, it meant that it probably was a bad thing if your neighborhood got known. And so in the '60s, Fort Apache, they called it Fort Apache because the cops said it was like cowboys and Indians out there. And so uh, to escape that situation, we used to draw comics and everything and trace out the comic characters. And then I would try to write the next story in the comics that was coming up because, Marvels were just one series after another. And you would read one comic and then you have to wait for the next month to read, the next installment of that series, of that story. So that's kind of like where I got my start in writing. Now they call it fan fiction, but back then it was just just something to do in an afternoon, hanging out.
so James, what is your favorite? Who's your favorite character in Marvel?
Uh, it changes. It was Daredevil for a very long time. Uh, uh, at one point, I got hit by a cab and I went blind for a couple hours. It probably was a concussion, as I find out now that you have a. But I was very afraid that I was going to be blind the rest of my life. And so naturally, I figured if I'm going to be blind, hopefully I'll have the powers of Daredevil. Of
Right?
course,
And,
yeah,
well, it's always cool to know, right? Who's our superheroes? Because my superhero is Alice in Wonderland, and everybody's like, "That's a superhero." And I was like, "Yeah, she goes down the rabbit hole. Come on, like she has a lifestyle, she has adventure. Come on."
yeah. Alice in Wonderland is a great story. And of course, um, the idea that she goes down this rabbit hole and she winds up in this fantastic world and all the different things that she runs into and meets. It's a great story.
Yeah. Well, I kind of went down the Alice in Wonderland hole for a reason, James, because you gave me tonight your tea is tales, experiences, and adventure. So that's what Alice did, right? And she had her tales and experiences and adventures. So why'd you give me those three words, James?
Uh, because, like I said, I started writing stories, and tales are simply stories that either are spawned from something that happened to us or things that we see or hear. And so, in we see something and we immediately create something from that. And so that's where tales come from. A lot of characters live in my head, and I like sooner or later get them out onto paper. Uh, Experiences shape our lives. A lot of times you hear people say, if you can go back in time, what would you change in your life? And I keep saying nothing because whatever happened to me in my past is what made me the person I am today. So you take those experiences, and I haven't lost any arms or legs or fingers or anything. So I can say that because nothing nothing so traumatic has happened to me, except for being hit by a car for doing something I shouldn't have been doing in the first place.
But it was an experience, right? You were
It
not
was
going to
an
do it again.
experience, yes. And I'm not blind now, so I can look back on that and say, well, thank God for that. And I have had other concussions playing football and things, so I now know, being knocked out is not the worst thing that can happen to you.
So let's talk about some of your adventures that you've had, because you gave me the word adventures, and I'm kind of curious about what kind of adventures James has had.
Well, adventures come in many forms. So there are some I could talk about, some I can't talk about or shouldn't talk about.
PG-13, right?
Yes,
Or rated
yes.
8 or 18.
You want to keep your audience, so we'll leave those adventures to the side. But I've been to like Egypt on an adventure to when I was writing the Killer series, because part of the story takes place in Egypt, and I wanted to really know what it's like to be out there in the desert, to be in Egypt, and to actually experience it. And so when you're a writer, you want to get these experiences, and you want to get these adventures, because that's what fuels your stories. You have your imagination, which is like the overarching universe that you have, but your adventures you start to fill in. Now, growing up in the South Bronx, I had many adventures, and like I said, you needed a gang to go anywhere. So it was, and I had a very small gang. We only had like 5 to maybe 6, 7 people in the gang at a time, because your gang was the people that lived in your block or in your building. And there were gangs that was like 20, 30, 50, expansive gangs. And so we had to fight our way through some things. We had to run sometimes. A lot of time we stashed weapons in the alleyway, so we would run to a particular spot, and then we would stand and fight. You would get to a spot where you knew you had crossbows and swords and all these kind of things that you had made, homemade weapons. And then, people would chase you into these places. And then it's like, okay, now we turn and fight. And you learn to fight in close quarters. You learn to fight in alleys. And I learned a lot of that from reading, because one of the places that was a safe haven was the library. So we would go to the library, and I read things like Alexander the Great, and Roman uh, battle plans, the phalanx and things like that, and how to create an army, or how to defeat an army if you only have a few people, that kind of thing. So those are the kind of adventures I had as a kid, and then as I grew up, my adventures got bigger and sometimes better and sometimes crazier.
Well, and that's what life is all about, right? It's the adventures, right? And you were in a
Yes,
small gang, so you didn't have too much trouble. The bigger the gang, the more trouble there is.
that's right.
It's easier to hide the stuff, right? When it's only a little bit of people.
Well, it's only a few people. You can pretty much, bury the evidence.
The reason that I'm taking you down that road, James, is because your series, the book series, when I seen the book series, I was like, oh, this is going to get really deep. The Killer series. And I'm like, oh, he's got darkness. Like, what is the Killer series all about?
The Killer series is about 2 guys. One's the son of a mobster, and the other's a gang leader from the South Bronx. And so they grow up, and well, they meet as teenagers, and because they come from similar worlds, they decide that Nicky decides he wants to rob a money drop that's in his neighborhood, and they're going to get Mojo Morris to seduce the mob boss's daughter to keep her busy while they sneak in and rob the place. And they figure everything's going to be fine and nothing, they'll never know it was them and everything. And of course, everything goes wrong. Now, when I moved out of the South Bronx, I moved to my mom's old neighborhood where she grew up, and it was Irish, Italian, German, and so it was actually a mob neighborhood. So I went from having a bunch of friends who were gangsters to having a bunch of friends who were mobsters. So the Killer series is an homage to the gang and mob life, because I wrote it because a lot of people, they don't know people who are in the mob, or you would not know somebody who is in the mob, and they show up on TV when they get arrested, and then it's like, ooh, I didn't know he was in the mob. I didn't know he did that, or I didn't know that guy was a gangster and all this kind of stuff. And so that was my homage to that life, and of course, the secretness of that life is that you wouldn't know that these people are doing it because they don't do things out in the open. And so, but they form these friendships, and their friendships are sometimes built on trust, loyalty, and of course, being able to keep a secret.
Well, sometimes we need those people to keep our secrets, right? To take them to the graves.
Yes.
We're not hiding anything, guys, over during this conversation, but we're just, sometimes some secrets need to be taken to the grave, right?
Yes. And so part of the Killer series is how these two guys become international criminals. They build this criminal empire, for one thing, because no one really, and it takes place in the 70s, pretty much 70s, 80s, 90s. So for the most part, people didn't see Black and Italians getting together like that, to where they would form this type of gang relationship. You have Black criminals, you have Italian criminals, you have Irish criminals, you have, but not mixed, because there was not the trust factor. Italians only trust Italian, Blacks will only trust Black, Irish only trust Irish. And there was no mixing. But there was some mixing back in the 70s among people in New York. And so, and Spanish and whatever. So I wrote the story with the idea of, okay, so you will see
we do have a winter storm coming on the brinks of hitting Canada, so it could be
okay. So I see. Yes. So
James, can you still hear me?
I can still hear you. It is a little choppy, but I can still hear you.
Awesome.
Okay, so so we have that kind of that's what the story is about, is how these two people become these international criminals, and an homage to that type of life. And now I think I'm losing you. So if we're still recording, and if you can still hear me, so that's why I wrote the Killer series. It's based on a bunch of people that I kind of grew up with and knew back in the day, and no one person or no one incident is in the book or in the books. So it is all fiction, but it's a fiction based on people and situations, not real events, but things that would happen if these people were real. Let's put it that way.
So, James, we have a question here. You say you come from the Bronx, and you say the Killer series, one of the characters is from the Bronx. So, is that character you?
No, that character is my alter ego, me.
Alter ego.
Yes, what I would be if I wasn't going to go to jail for doing the thing that these people do. You don't want to go to jail, so you don't actually do these type of things. But if I was, like I said, a lot of the ideas are your imagination, and you base your stories on the thing that you imagine would happen if this other thing happened.
Well, I think that's how it makes a good writer, right? Is we kind of put ourselves into the shoes a little bit with a little bit of the alter ego, but then we create this character that is way out of who we are.
Yeah. Like I said, if I had an alter ego, if I could put on my Superman cape, I would be Morris. But
There we
Morris
go, right? We go right back to the heroes, right? We go back
yes.
to Superman.
Well, yeah. Well, Morris is a hero. Nikki is a hero in their world, and it was funny because I went to California and I was trying to sell the story to the movies and everything, and the guy tells me, one of these guys told me, you don't have any. What did he say? You don't have any sort of good people in your story, you know. And I've said, yes, they are good people. They're good to each other, you know. They're honorable to each other. So yeah, they are good people. Yes, they're bad people to the rest of the world because they're criminals, but they also have loyalty and they also have honor and they also have these other, qualities that you will find in a hero, It's just that we're looking at it from the other side of the coin. We're looking at it from the criminal side of the coin.
So, James, how do you bounce from different genres? Because you got science fiction, then you got fantasy, then you got romance. Like you got a little bit of everything there. So, how do you jump from each genre when you write?
The story told me what genre it's going to fall into. So, when I start to think of a story and I start to put together an idea, it would tell me, okay, this is going to be a sci-fi. And this one is going to be a fantasy, like the Emerald Lady. It's about mermaids, pirates, and it's a historical, so it takes place in the golden age of piracy. I now live in Virginia Beach, which is near Norfolk. So it's a big Navy town. And at one point, I was working at the Navy Yard, shipyard, and that thing been around since the mid 1700s. It used to be British, and they still have the British flag there. And so it was like, okay, I worked in a place where I worked at a horse barn. So with these long buildings, and the horse barn was there because they used to drag the ships out into the water. They needed teams of horses to launch the ship. So if you go around that base and everything, you can see all sorts of historical artifacts and things like that. And it lent itself to the story. And so the story became this fantasy of during the Revolutionary War, what happens if mermaids and men and everything was intertwined into this life. And so it became this historical fantasy of what sparked the American Revolution, And so you find out that the American Revolution was actually sparked by mermaids, a war between the mermaids. And it just spilled over because they used men as part of the thing. And it goes deeper than that. It goes much deeper than that. But that would be the beginning or the overview of the story. And then as you get into the characters, of course, you get more deeper, more introspection, and you get what these people are being, what spurs them on, what causes them to do the things they do, what makes them the characters they are.
So I'm going to take you off of the books and we're going to go into the publishing world now. So you founded the Rockhill Publishing in 2014, I believe.
Yeah, 2013, 2014. Yeah.
So what brought that on?
Well, for years I was trying to get published, and I went the regular route of trying to find agents and publishers, and I wanted to write in short stories because I figured I could write more short stories in the amount of time than I could write novels. And I figured I'll break into the publishing world with my short stories, mostly sci-fi short stories. And so I went the whole gambit of trying to get into publishing, try to get published. And it became such a drag and such a defeatist attitude among the publishing world. Like, okay, you have to get this agent, but before you can get an agent, and it was that's all these doors that were blocking, and all these different people that just taking up time just trying to get through all this. And so as a programmer, I worked on document processing, and I worked on actually publishing information for different industries, financial industry, government industry. And so I learned how to actually publish information. I learned how to format. I learned how to work the programs and all that kind of stuff. And I realized, hey, you know what? I don't really need a publisher. I can do this myself. What I need is a good editor, which I found in South Africa, and I needed access to the marketplace, which I found through Amazon and Ingram and all these other uh, ways. So as that industry started taking off, I realized, hey, I can create my own publishing company. And self-publishing was losing that stigma of being, you know, a vanity industry. There's still vanity publishing, but you have a much wider self-publishing uh, environment now. And so I figured I can do it for myself. And then when I'm at signings and stuff like that, people will ask me, "Hey, how did you get published? How did this happen for you? And what was your road?" And then I realized there are so many people out there who could use a good publisher, and and so I figured I'll publish other people too. Once I learned how to do it for myself, I figured why not? And you don't need an agent. You don't need all these other things that people would have. All you need is a good story and be well written. And
Yeah.
so I launched my publishing company, and I just put out for submissions. And people, believe me, people submit to you. So the same way I was sending out dozens of submissions to people, I get dozens of submissions. So much so that I had to every now and then I have to close down my submission and you know limit the amount of publications of other people I publish. But I found very good authors in the mix. You know.
Yeah, I seen on your site that you had an author that you work with that was also on Tea Time, Mark Everglades. He was on Tea Time, and I was like, "Oh, small world! Look at that! James knows Mark."
Oh yes, and Mark is a fantastic writer. He's got, in fact, we're putting out his third book in his trilogy, probably the beginning of next year. We're working on that one. So I put out his last two books, and I'm sure he talked at length about those two. And like I said, he's a fantastic writer. He writes cyberpunk, which I did not know existed until I met Mark. You know, but his story was so compelling and so interesting, and I love the idea that he had created with cyber technology and everything. So I was like, oh, this is right up my alley. This is science fiction that I can sink my teeth into.
Well, that's what I liked. And when I did my homework on you, James, I seen that you have a limited amount of authors, but it's going right back to what you said at the beginning of the show, right? Small gangs, right?
Yes.
Bigger impact, because you can work deeper with that person. When you have too many, then it gets overloaded, right? And it just you can't give you can't give perfection to everybody because you're overwhelmed with so much work.
Yes. And because it's just me and my editor, it's we become, like you say, you get overwhelmed and you get too many. So we try to keep it small. We try to publish only a couple of authors a year, because we also would like to write our own stuff and publish our own stuff. But I have people who are out there that are when something comes across your desk and you say, "Wow, this is great," then you want to be able to give it the attention that it deserves.
Yeah,
And
because
so
you work with some really incredible authors. I found another author, Athena Paris.
yes, she's my editor, and she's a romance writer slash fantasy. She is now working on a fantasy, and she had wrote multiple romances, really good, sort of soap opera romances. They cover generations. Her stories are not quick. This boy meets girl type of thing. her story run generations and go deep into the psychology and into the emotions of relationships and everything. So her romances are really good. In fact, that's what attracted me to her to be my editor. I was talking to her, and we would conversing back and forth through Facebook and everything. And she liked to edit and everything. She had a really good knowledge and desire for editing. And then I read her book. I read one of the books that the book that she had put out previously, and I read that, and I said, well, this is a great story, and this is really a wonderful telling of a tale. So then I asked her if she would be my editor, and from then on, we've been collaborating and working together. And like I said, she has a fantastic mind.
So, James, was that Love and Madness that you read?
Yes. Love and
I
Madness
kind of figured it was.
It was her very first book. It was like me, she published through somebody else first, and then when we got together, we republished the book and everything, and she helped me republish my books, and we started this whole collaboration. We're going on 10, 11 years now.
So, James, I noticed your logo for Rockhill Publishing is a dragon. So, where does a dragon come in?
Okay, dragons are universal. First off, in multiple cultures, they are dragons, and they have different meanings. Like in the Eastern world, dragons are usually a symbol of good luck and strength. In the Western world, dragons are the evil, monsters that they have to slay. So the idea of a dragon being both the evil and the good. So they're protectors and they are defenders. And they are also something that, you have to fight to get past. And that dragon that you see on my logo was created by my nephew, who's an artist. And I just told him I wanted this idea of this dragon sitting on a rock that would be like the guardian type of dragon and everything. And I gave him this idea, and he said, "Well, how would you want it?" I said, "No. I gave you the idea. You're the artist. You come back to me with something." And so he drew this. He drew my dragon for me, and that became my logo. Now I'm trying to get him to do other artwork for me because I would like to turn the Killer series into a what you call those things? The not comics, but the
like a series.
Yeah.
Like Netflix series.
No, yeah, but in book form. They what do they call those things now? See, it's
Comic books.
Well, they're a little bit more than just comic books. I've been to many Comic Cons now, and I see how they have these books and these series, and not anime, but it's something like anime, where they have these books that are illustrated.
Oh, illustrations.
Yeah, so these illustrated books, and I'm trying to get him to do it. I don't know if I'm ever going to get him to do it, but I'm trying to get him to illustrate. Maybe I can get him to do the Gemstone series with the dragons and stuff, because I think he might like that more. So when I come out with the second book.
So James, who does the covers of your books?
Various people. I do some of them. I have a artist in California that she does some. So so I hire some people. I also Mark does his own covers, so he's really good at that. So it depends. I do some of the covers because, like I said, I know that type of work and Adobe and things like that. And I also have a artist who does covers for me. So and I was living out in San Diego, and I met her, and she was a aspiring artist, so I got her to do it.
So, James, the Emerald Lady, what is that book based on?
The Emerald Lady is the fantasy um, pirate mermaid book, and
Okay.
it's based on the idea that there were three. I came up with my own mythology. So there was men, there was mermaids, and then there were dragons. And the dragons are created from this other race of being called the Molotons. And the Molotons were sort of like the cleanup spirits of the world. So they would go and they would go around the world and they would clean up the dead and dying so that the world can continue to flourish. And the mermaids were taking care of the sea and life there, and men were supposed to take care of the land. Well, the Molotov got corrupted and become dragons, or at least a couple of them did, and became dragons. And since the Molotov basically was there to clean up the dead, the dragons then became this force that was causing people to die. And, so they became a darker force that what the Molotov was originally a force for good. They became the darker side of it. And therefore, and the mermaids fight against them, and the men are just caught in the middle of these wars.
So, James, we have a question here for you. Do you believe in mermaids?
Yes, I believe there's all sorts of possibilities. So mermaids could be as real as you and I. Um, why haven't we found any? Maybe they don't want to be found. Maybe they already have passed away, have gone extinct. Uh, like what I believe that dragons were actually when people found dinosaur bones and they find the fossils and they imagine, oh, well, this has to be this creature, and they make this idea of a dragon. Well, a mermaid could be somewhat similar to that, of people finding something that they imagine this must be an intelligent being that lived in the water, And of course, being people, we always cast ourselves into whatever we imagine. So
Well, it kind of goes right back to storytelling, right, James? Like we imagine these characters and these fantasy lands and everything. When we put all these bones together, it's like a puzzle, right? Everybody
yeah,
put the puzzle together differently. Like some might do all the outside first and then the middle, and then the middle outside. And I think that's a good point where you said, like I think dragons existed way before the dinosaurs did. I think they were like cousins.
well, like we said, we have seen so many different varieties of life on this earth. And there are some people who think that mankind has restarted multiple times, that we have gone through different changes and different extinctions where we come back again. And, the whole idea of the circle of life, that you get to a point where you could no longer go forward and then you go back and start all over again. And that could be true too. So who knows? Maybe we did have mermaids and dragons at one point. Uh, the idea of angels also is a universal idea. In every culture, there are angels. So there are some things that are universal to us that everybody believes. And no matter where you are, where you live, everybody has the same belief. And so these things, universal truths, let's say.
So, James, you have another book here called Pegasus: A New Journey to the New Eden. What's that one about?
That was actually the first novel that I wrote back in the 80s. And
Oh,
that's a modern day Noah's Ark. And it came about because during the SALT treaties, for people who are younger than me, the SALT treaty was uh, the United States and Russia treaty to limit the nuclear weapons. and the amount of warheads and all that kind of stuff. And so we had this treaty that said, okay, we're going to limit how many warheads we could put on a rocket. We're going to limit how many rockets each side will have, and we're going to, so we can manage the destruction of the world better. You know, not that we're not going to destroy the world, but we're going to manage it a little better. And so I was asked, what did I think about that? And I said, well, until we find another place to go, we don't really have to worry about nuclear war. But the minute we find another planet that is habitable, all bets are off. And so Pegasus is the first light ship that we built, because if you want to go anywhere in the universe, you have to at least reach light speed. And so they go to a planet they dubbed New Eden, which is 4 light years away, which is our nearest star to us. The Alpha Centauri system is 4 light years away. And then after that, I think the next one is like 25 light years away. So if you could travel at the speed of light, you can get to the stars in our neighborhood within a reasonable amount of time. So Pegasus becomes the Noah's Ark that they build, and they're going to take all the good parts of the Earth, because let's face it, if you're traveling 4 light years away, you're not coming back. So you're going to take all the good parts from Earth, and you're going to transport that to this other planet, which they believe is Earth-like, or at least habitable. And so, yeah.
You better buckle up, right? Because you ain't coming home.
No. And based on how people traveled around the world, when they found the new world, you know, America, they had no intention of coming back. It was like, if you had to make it or not, because to get from Europe to America took months, and there was no guarantee you were going to make it, and therefore there was no guarantee you could make it back across the Atlantic and across the Pacific and things like that. So when people go on these things and they find new places, it's usually a one-way trip. No one ever find these places and say, you know, well, we'll stay there for a while and then we'll go back. No, if we're going to stay there, and that's going to be our home. And so in that spirit is what I wrote Pegasus in, the spirit of adventure and finding a new land, and what could go wrong when you rely so heavily on technology, and the idea that when you go somewhere, or you bring all your problems with you. You know, people always try to run away from themselves, but you can't run away from yourself. So because you found someplace new to go, don't mean you won't have problems when you get there, because you're still bringing all the baggage with you when you go somewhere. So that is what Pegasus is about. They're trying to escape a world that has slipped into a dystopian society, but yet that dystopian society is hanging on to them, and they have to break free of that life and find the true meaning of humanity.
We have a question here for you, James. What is dystopian?
Dystopian is a society that the government, or whatever society you have, is more powerful than the individual. And it's usually dark, because they're trying to hold down the individual and make everybody serve some government or something. You can look at communism as being a dystopian. You can look at capitalism as being dystopian. There are so many people who do not make enough money to have a good life, and you can't break through to make more money, because the government is holding you down, or who's ever in charge is holding down, because they need the people to work. They don't need the people to achieve. And that becomes a dystopian society. So dystopian is the opposite of a utopian society, where everything is happy and people are flourishing, and the government is there to serve the people. In a dystopian society, the people are there to serve the government, whatever form that government may take.
So, do you feel that we're in a dystopian world today?
Yes, yes, and people get hung up on things of communism, socialism, capitalism, but it's all really the same. It's all very much the same. It's those who have want to keep what they have, and those who don't have are trying to get to that point, and they're being held back.
Well, it's like control, right? Power
Yes,
trip.
yeah. And believe me, dystopianism have been around for very, very long. It takes on many different names. I mean, we have kingdoms, we have empires, we have all these different words for it. But basically, you don't have a utopian society. There's very few utopian societies that have ever flourished because somebody is always trying to better themselves at the expense of everybody else.
So, James, do you have any future books coming out or anything you're working on that's going to be coming out that we should know about?
Yes, I am actually working on a horror story now.
Oh,
Well, I'm working on two stories. I'm working on the second book in the Gemstone series called The Ruby Cradle. So we're going to go back to the Age of Castles, where the mermaids actually had fought the dragons. So that's one book. But I also finally got to write a horror story. And Stephen King has been one of my favorite authors for a very long time, and Edgar Allan Poe. And I love horror in the idea of the story. And so I finally and I was asked to do a couple of horror stories for some anthologies, and that kind of like opened the floodgates to me creating this horror story because I could not get a full length novel out of a story. I can get some short stories out, but I couldn't really wrap my mind around a story that would be horror in a full length version. And so I finally, after writing a couple of short stories again, I finally all of a sudden it opened up to me, and I was like, oh, that's it. Now I can write this, and so I have this story coming out, this novel coming out called "The House of Sun and Shadow." So look for
oh.
that in another year or so.
So
I'll
coming
be
out in
working.
the next year.
Yeah, yeah.
The House of
Sun and Shadow.
Sun and Shadows. Oh, when you said that we can't run away from ourselves, it's like that pesky shadow that's always behind us that's saying, I'm going to get you, you know? And then you're talking about stories, and I'm talking about running, like, you know? So when you're writing this book, James, have you scared yourself a little?
Uh, Not really scared myself, but somewhat disturbed myself.
I don't know if that should be even scarier, right? I'm disturbed by what I just wrote and what I
Yeah,
just came
some
up with.
some of it is kind of disturbing. It's like, you because I started really thinking about not horror in the idea of monsters, but horror in the idea of persons and personalities and what would drive somebody to become a monster. Because you have your monsters like Frankenstein, Dracula, and the Wolfman, and these kind of you know thing where people transform into these other beings. But then you also have monsters where people have such darkness in them and in their soul that they will do horrible things to other people, and
Yeah.
and that creates the monster in somebody else. I'll just leave it there because I don't want to get
Well,
too deep
I think
into
that's
that.
where the disturb comes in, right? It's because it goes into a place of so dark thoughts that it's disturbing.
Yes, and that's what it gets because you have to think of somebody and create this person who is so dark and so evil and so bad that and you have to balance that because what drove them to that point? What made them that way? And so you have to put into this person some qualities that if they weren't like this, they'd be okay. They'd be a pretty nice guy. But let's face it, this guy went off the deep end, and he is way down in the mud now.
So James, coming from your lifestyle growing up in gangs and that, did you see stuff that kind of gave you some insight to these characters and stories that you write?
Oh yeah, yeah. I mean, like I said, you know people who have done some very bad things. You know, and I don't mean know them personally because not everybody you would know personally, but you know when you hear about this guy, you're like, whoa, well, really, he was into that? I thought he was such a nice guy because
It's the nice guys you got to watch. The
yeah,
bad boys are the ones that you don't got to worry about because you already know they're bad.
yeah. And then you find out that this guy who lived a nice, quiet life and everything, yeah, he buried people in his backyard. You know, he killed these people and they're buried out there in the backyard. You know, and it's like, well, he was such a nice guy. You know, he tipped me really nice when I delivered his paper. You know, things
Yeah.
like that, and
Well,
those become the monsters that you really base your stories on.
yeah. Well, the monster lives within, right?
Right.
There you go. A new title for a new book coming out there, James.
That might be the title of something already.
You just never know. We have
Yeah,
another question
it
for you,
sounds
James.
familiar.
So we have a question here for you, James. Do you come up with the story first or the title of the book first?
Both. Sometimes I can't write the story till I come up with the title, and sometimes I write the story and then somewhere in it the title comes to me. Like Killer with a Heart. I was almost finished with that book when the title came to me because it was going to be called something completely different. And I got to like well into the book, into toward the end of the book, and that's when the title hit me. And that's when, because I had planned the Killer series from beginning to end. All four books was well planned in my head before I started writing any of it. And so as I'm writing the first book and everything, and I have a completely different title for it and series idea for it and everything else, and then it hit me, no, 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 no. This is your title. This is it. And from then on, of course, the other titles then follow. But I usually don't start writing until I have a title. But sometimes the story's already there, but I have to know what I want to call it. And then sometimes I don't have a title. I'll just start writing because it's like, okay, if I'm just sitting here trying to think of a title, I'm not getting anything done. So I better just start writing and we'll call it something, story A.
Hmm. Have you ever come up with a title and then changed it when the story's finished?
uh, well, like I said, Killer with the Heart had a completely different title to it, and I changed that. So it was like, yeah, I change the titles when I think of a better title. And sometimes, like I said, sometimes the titles are just a placeholder to put on top of the page because I'm like, I don't really like that title, but I'm gonna have to get writing, so we'll call it this for now. Maybe a better title will come along.
So James, do you
Sometimes
have
the
any?
title just hits me and it's just like that's it.
So James, do you have any upcoming events that anybody should know about?
Uh, I'm pretty much wrapped up for the winter. Um, I do believe I'm going to be out someplace else, and I'm going to do another interview podcast next Tuesday. So that one will. I don't think it's going to be a live one like this one. So, but I'll post it when it's when it's people could see it. And I'm not sure if I have. Let me look at my calendar. There's nothing on the calendar for December. So the
Well,
next
that's a
thing I'm
good thing. December is a month of rest.
yeah, yeah, and it's pretty cold, and I don't like to go out in the cold. But there's some things around like Smithfield. Um, Sometime I don't know if it's in December or in January, but there's something locally that I do. I do First Fridays, which are now over because the summer had passed, which is in Portsmouth. So yeah, and I'll be at BoucherCon 2025. That's coming up. Um, in New Orleans. So if anybody listening is going to be in New Orleans, check me out at the VoucherCon. I'll be there.
So, James, I want to talk to you. I seen some awards. You got the Reader's Choice Award, and then you got what's the other one I got here? Firebook Awards. What's Firebook Award?
Oh, did I actually win that? I was going to check with them and find out if I actually won.
I don't know if you won, but I found the awards.
Yeah. The Firebook Award is some people in Texas are putting together an award for new authors and independent authors. And so that was something that I applied to, and I applied for some of my authors to put in for them. And like I was just looking the other day to say, hey, I wonder what happened with that award. When were they going to draw? When were they going to award that? So I was going to go back and check into it. I get busy.
There you go. A reminder.
Yeah. So I got to put that on the calendar. I have a calendar over here on my wall, a big wall calendar that I write everything into. So I have to go right in there. Hey, check on this to see if you won.
Well, there you go, right? I just gave you a reminder to put something on the calendar for December.
Yes. And the Reader's Choice Award was another one that I applied to, I guess, and don't know what happened with that one either. I applied to some awards, but I don't really follow up to see if they don't send me back information and say, hey, you won this or something. Sometimes I don't know because I don't really pay attention to the awards that much.
Yeah.
I have on my, let me see, Killer Nashville, which I go to every year. And I had some books that went into the Killer Nashville Award, and I got like second place, honorable mention, whatever, on some of the Killer books. They do a conference every year, so I've been back and forth to that about 4 or 5 years, and so the Killer some of the books went up for awards and that. They have a really, really nice Claymore Award, which is a dagger stuck in a globe. And ooh, I really want to win that so I can put it on my bar.
Right. Some of the awards that they make are incredible. Like the detail of the award is just different and unique, right?
Yes. And that's one that if there was an award to win, I would like to win that. It looks cool. You know, other than that, I really don't pay much attention to awards and things like that. But it's nice. It's always nice to be recognized by your peers and by, you know, people in your industry or something. But it's more important to be recognized by your readers.
Well, I'm going to go right into it because I asked you one word to describe yourself and you gave me likable. And you just said, be nice, like everybody, you know, be the nice person. So why the word likable?
Well, because a lot of people tell me I'm likable. I don't know why, but they meet me and they say, well, you know, you're a nice person and likable. And children like me, children and dogs, you know. So,
well, that's a good thing. When dogs like you, that's a good thing.
Yes. So I'm a likable person. Little kids take to me and, you know, they just I guess I'm grandfatherly now. So, but people that say, hey, and it's because I try to look for the good in people. You know, I don't judge people. I try not to judge people. I try to see some good in everybody. Now, if you show me that you have no good in you, then I just leave you alone. I don't judge you. I just walk away. You know, I don't put anybody down. Everybody has their own, because you don't know what people go through in their life. So it's something.
So James, we're going to wrap it up, and I'm going to ask you, your favorite color that you gave me was black. So why black? And then we'll get your final words before we wrap up.
I just like black. It's not really a color.
Does it make you look slim?
Well, that's what they say. Black makes you look slim, but you know, at some point, nothing helps you look slim. You just don't see all the curves or all the what's the name. But for as long as I could remember, I just like the color black.
And your final words to all the listeners tonight.
Final words, huh? Well, this is Thanksgiving, here in the States, and then many people who need help. So if you come across somebody who needs help and you're able to help them, please do. Pay it forward, because everybody has something that they can give, and everybody needs something to get them over the hump or to get them on to the next life. So you never know what your generosity or what goodwill that you bring somebody would do for that life, for that person's life.
Well, thank you so much, James. I had a pleasure sitting with you and getting to know you a little bit on the dark side and on the light side.
Yeah, I'm not all dark.
But I really want to thank you for joining and sharing your tea tonight with us, and we'll be back on the 28th with the 2 final tea times of November. And then December, we have 13 final tea times. And then we have the reunion wrap up for Miss Liz, where Miss Liz will be saying farewell to everybody after 5 years. So stay tuned for that. But on the 28th, we have Kyle Kuhn coming in with Paralympic, and he'll be coming in and sharing his story where he went to the Olympics in Paris. And then we have the Sad Time podcast coming in. Kevin Kristen, he'll be coming in and talking about his podcast and opportunities for you guys to join him on that podcast. Again, thank you, James, for joining me. Thank you to the listeners and the supporters out there. I could not do this without all of you guys. So keep sharing your tea, keep being true to yourselves, and we will make a difference 1 cup of tea at a time.
Thank you. It was a pleasure.